on your radio, on the LBC app, and
Play LBC.
leading Britain's conversation. This is LBC.
From Global's newsroom at 6 o'clock, Prince Harry has arrived at Clarence House to see the King in what will be their first meeting in more than a year. The last time they saw each other was after Charles announced he was undergoing cancer treatment in February 2024. The Israeli First Lady has defended the decision to strike Hamas leaders in Qatar as her husband, the President, meets Keir Starmer in Downing Street. Michael Herzog has been speaking exclusively to LBC after the group's negotiating team were targeted.
These negotiators have gone back and forth for the past almost 2 years. Okay? Except when President Trump really intervened, nothing happened.
The Prime Minister has previously condemned the attacks, warning against escalation. Kemi Badenoch has called for the British ambassador to the US to be sacked following further reports of his friendship with Jeffrey Epstein. The Prime Minister has insisted he has confidence in Lord Mandelson, who says he regrets their friendship. And 5 candidates remain in the contest to become Labour's next deputy leader. Housing Minister Alison McGovern has pulled out of the race, throwing her support behind Education Secretary Bridget Phillipson. In the city, the FTSE 100 has closed down 17 points at 92.25. The pound buys $1.35 and €1.15. LBC weather: rain clearing to the northeast tonight, showers lingering in northern and western areas, a low of 5 degrees. From Global's newsroom for LBC, I'm Amelia Cox.
This is LBC from Global, leading Britain's conversation. It's 6 p.m. Now, Tonight with Andrew Marr.
Good evening. I have now discovered the new and best word to describe my career: durable. And No. I think it just about captures it to a T.
The durable Peter, Lord Mandelson, speaking at Ditchley Park in Oxfordshire on Saturday. Now, my job is to bring you news, which by and large is stuff that has not happened before. So here is news. Kemi Badenoch did really well in the Commons today, battering the Prime Minister over Lord Mandelson, our ambassador in Washington, and his past links with the sex criminal Jeffrey Epstein.
Does the Prime Minister have full confidence in Peter Mandelson? Was the Prime Minister aware of this intimate relationship when he appointed Lord Mandelson to be our ambassador in Washington? Mr. Speaker, I asked the Prime Minister if he knew. The fact that he didn't answer indicates that he probably did know. I wasn't asking a question about process. I was asking a question about his judgment. Mr. Speaker, I think it is embarrassing that the Prime Minister is still saying that he has confidence in a man who was brokering deals with convicted child sex offenders while sitting in government. That is a disgrace. The ambassador should be in the White House talking about how we respond to an incursion into NATO airspace. Instead, he is giving interviews about himself to The Sun.
This is genuinely new. The Tory leader's been really poor at holding the Prime Minister to account, and I've reported pretty bluntly about her past failures. So, as a fair-minded man, it's only right to tell you when she has done very well. But now I'm in a quandary, because we come to the issue on which Badenoch was ripping into Keir Starmer. And I ask myself whether the combination of the phrases Peter Mandelson, high office, scandal, and calls for resignation of qualifies as news. I mean, it's happened before. His enemies would say these oops moments happen to him with the regularity with which most people buy a new electric toothbrush. It's not exactly a surprise. But it does, of course, leave the Prime Minister with a real problem. The details of Mandelson's sycophantic notes to Jeffrey Epstein are bad enough. But he's now told The Sun he believes further embarrassing correspondence between himself and the paedophile is still to emerge. Now, in the peer's favour are the fact that all of this is more than 20 years old, that he said he deeply regrets this friendship, that he's done a good job in Washington, and that Donald Trump, who is under attack himself over Epstein, might regard sacking Mandelson as a hostile act by Starmer. On the other hand, The case for going ahead anyway is that this story is going to run and run. It's going to hang around the Prime Minister's neck just as President Trump arrives in Britain for his state visit, and that, with Peter, despite his boasted durability, things do tend to end this way. Starmer's said to be ruthless, and tonight there are plenty of former ministers who would agree with that. But this is a very high-stakes decision. As we wait to see how ruthless the Prime Minister really is, let's hear Lord Mandelson himself in fully regretful mode with The Sun.
One, I feel a tremendous sense, a profound sense of sympathy for those people, those women who suffered as a result of his behaviour and his illegal criminal activities. And secondly, I regret very, very deeply indeed carrying on that association with him for far longer than I should have done.
Now, first tonight, I want to talk to Gloria Allred, the US attorney who's represented Epstein's victims, some of whom have been calling for Lord Mandelson to resign and saying there is no way the Prime Minister wasn't aware of the relationship between the two men. What is her view of this relationship?
You know, I'm very concerned. Yes, his relationship was known, but now we see in the birthday book his calling Jeffrey Epstein his best pal. And even though he appeared to try to distance himself somewhat later when the scandal broke and some of the crimes were known, I wonder what he is willing to do. It's not just about, is he willing to resign as ambassador to the United States? But there is an investigation ongoing in Congress into Jeffrey Epstein and Ms. Maxwell, and many of the survivors, and I was at and spoke at the pre-rally in Washington, D.C. last week with some of the survivors, and they want accountability, they want transparency, they want the truth to be known. They know their own truth, Andrew, but they want to know the big picture, and they want to be held accountable. Any third party, any rich, powerful, famous man or not so famous man who might have known Mr. Epstein and Ms. Maxwell, associated with them, and if that person, that man, enabled them, assisted them in sex trafficking or sexually exploiting children or adults, then that person should also be held accountable. Right now, all we know is what we see in the birthday book and what Lord Mandelson has been willing to say. I suggest, why doesn't he volunteer to speak at some of the congressional hearings and tell anything and everything that he knows that they might ask him? Because after all, he knows a lot. That doesn't mean he committed a crime, doesn't mean he did anything wrong. But he saw young girls. We see the photo in the birthday book of a young girl. We don't know how old she is. Her face is not shown, but she's wearing underwear. How many young girls did he see there? What were they doing? With whom were they doing it? How often were they doing it? He should speak out about these things and help and not distance himself from all of this. It's important.
Given what you're saying, do you think it's appropriate that he is Britain's ambassador?
Well, I'd like to see what he's willing to do. If he's willing to do nothing but say, I regret knowing Jeffrey Epstein, that's nothing. That's like, I got my hands, caught in the cookie jar and, I'm sorry, and that's supposed to be enough. This is about a sexual predator, Mr. Epstein, who committed crimes against children. And it's about that in reference to Ms. Maxwell as well. So I'd like to know, does he agree with what is said in a birthday greeting allegedly by Donald Trump? And of course, President Trump says that's not his signature. But does he agree with the sentiment of whoever wrote that and signed it as Donald Trump, that every wonderful day should be a secret? Well, it wasn't a wonderful day for the victims who were on Little St. James Island with Jeffrey Epstein at his residence, and many of whom saw Lord Mandelson there. We probably interacted with him in some way. We don't know in what way. So he has to reach out and try to help in this investigation. To answer your question clearly and specifically, if he doesn't reach out, if he doesn't volunteer to say what he knows, then I think he should resign. Because maybe it was fun and games for him on that boat we saw him on, smiling and happy in the sunshine and the water. It wasn't that happy day, happy vacation time for many of the victims. So I believe in, what the saying, deeds, not words. I'd like to see what he's willing to do. If he just wants to remain silent, that's not enough. He should resign.
I am sort of bending over backwards, to be fair. There's no indication that Peter Mandelson was involved in any kind of trafficking or any kind of crime that we know of. And he might say, we all make mistakes with our friends. I had no idea what he was up to. He seemed to be charming and eloquent and generous. And it's a terrible mistake, but that's all that happened. I made friends with the wrong person.
Well, that's not enough, okay? A mea culpa. I didn't know. How could I know? Did I know? No, I didn't know. That's not enough. I mean, I don't know if he's trying to follow the example of, Prince Andrew, which is, say nothing and then try to hope it all goes away. I've called on Prince Andrew also to volunteer, to speak to law enforcement in the United States. Of course, he hasn't done it. Why not? He has suggested in a prior interview that he really doesn't know anything that could help. That's paraphrased, but that's the essence of it. It's not for him to judge whether he knows anything that could help or not, and neither is it for Lord Mandelson, in my opinion. Let him say, if you want to ask me questions about what I saw and what happened on Little St. James Island or any other residence that I may have visited or in any other place that I saw or was with Jeffrey Epstein or Ms. Maxwell, feel free to ask me anything and everything. Like anyone, I am happy to provide any information I know about where a crime was committed, even if I didn't see it. He hasn't done it yet. I offer him that invitation to do it. I would assist him in, contacting members of Congress for him to be heard, both of them. But, just can't stand back and say, oh, I didn't know. Well, should you have known? What were all those young girls doing there? Isn't that a bit unusual, to say the least?
Yeah. Gloria Allred, I hope that invitation is heard by Lord Mandelson and by many other people in London. Thank you very, very much for talking to LBC tonight. And for more on this very fast-moving story, let's speak next to our political editor, Natasha Clark. Natasha, I said fast-moving, and I said at the top of the show, more embarrassing details, and they're out already, or some of them are. Just tell us more.
Yes, there's 2 already out this evening. They say when in Westminster, it doesn't rain, it pours, don't they? So 2 of those this evening. The Times newspaper firstly reporting that officials blocked the release of a secret memo in which Lord Mandelson urged Sir Tony Blair to meet with Jeffrey Epstein when he was Prime Minister. He's understood to have encouraged Blair to meet Epstein in 2002 in a note passed to key aides, which was blocked from being released by the National Archives. So more people potentially being wrapped up.
But this is relatively early in the story.
This is. And what's actually more damning is a second revelation out this evening, an email that has been seen by the Sun newspaper from Mandelson to Epstein himself in June 2008. And just a reminder of the timeline, that's 2 years after he was first indicted in the US over those child sex abuse claims. He said, "I think the world of you. I feel hopeless and furious about what's happened. I can still barely understand it. It could not happen in Britain. You have to be resilient, fight for early release and be philosophical. Everything can be turned into an opportunity and that you will come out through it and be stronger for it." And this final line, Andrew, pretty damning. "Your friends stay with you and love you." That is 2 years after all of these allegations first came out about Jeffrey Epstein and his friendship with him. And I think really what you saw from that interview earlier that came out this morning with Harry Cole from The Sun was really where he admitted that wrongdoing, that he'd stayed friends with him for far, far longer than he needed to. And I think the question that Keir Starmer and people in Downing Street are asking tonight, how much did the Prime Minister know about that friendship? Of course, many of these allegations were already in the media and already in newspapers, and they have been known for a very long time. But this now is a question about Sir Keir Starmer's judgment. You saw Kemi Badenoch at Prime Minister's Questions really nail the boot in. This is about the Prime Minister. This is about his judgment. Of course, it comes just after Angela Rayner last week. Now, is he going to be basically accused of having the same sort of judgment?
Well, I'm quite sure Keir Starmer's instinct will be to hold on to Peter Mandelson if he can. But if he does that, it's going to be drip, drip, drip. It's going to be around his neck for a long time to come.
Yes, and of course, the argument is, well, if you cut him loose now, this does not overshadow the state visit, which, of course, Peter Mandelson has been instrumental in helping increase those relationships. Also, of course, I'm sure will be considered the fact that the Foreign Office, obviously, Yvette Cooper now going there, not having those links as well maintained.
She's not a natural ally of
She's
Peter
not
Mandelson,
like David Lammy and JD Vance, who were close allies. So there's lots to consider.
Lots to consider there. Well, let's get a view now from inside the Labour Party, because I'm joined in the studio by Lord Maurice Glasman, who has said about Mandelson in Washington when this first started, whenever his name came up, people showed me pictures of him out shopping with Jeffrey Epstein. Is that really true, Maurice?
Yeah, I mean, it was quite remarkable. When I was there for the inauguration, I mean, people would spontaneously walk up to me with their phones out, and say, why are you sending this guy? I mean, there was an understanding across MAGA, certainly, where QAnon is massive. This Epstein story is huge in their mental of a global ring of paedophiles. And Mandelson was completely, in their minds, implicated in that story.
This group of very powerful, well-connected men hanging around Epstein.
Yeah. Overwhelmingly progressive, so it was polarised, a very big polarisation in the campaign.
Now, of course, as Peter Mandelson himself has said, he is gay, so he's very unlikely to be involved in any interest whatever in girls, young or otherwise. Nonetheless, there is a kind of drumbeat, we've just heard it from Gloria Allred, either he's going to have to resign, or at the very least he should be testifying to Congress about what he knew and what he saw and when.
No, absolutely. It's astonishing to me that he hasn't already offered partnership and cooperation with the legal authorities. It's absolutely vital with this story that the public know the truth. What is the truth? And all this stuff, I mean, how's Trump involved is an important aspect of the story. He was certainly hanging around that space, as was Bill Clinton and the Democrats. So this is all percolating in a conspiratorial darkness.
I mean, the defence on the Mandelson side would be that he's been a very, very successful ambassador in Washington, and Trump likes him and gets on with him. And with the visit coming up, stick with the guy you know.
Well, Sneaky Pete. I mean, I think if Trump has a genius, it's for nicknames, and I think he's got that one nailed on. I mean, it's important to assess Peter Mandelson is one of the most significant figures of the last 30 years in politics. I disagree with him about virtually everything, but I respect him more than virtually all others because he was ideologically coherent. Globalisation, the EU, transferable skills, all of this new Labour agenda was very much the product of his imagination and his political discipline. But that time has passed.
Well, so let me ask you about the time that has come. Peter Mandelson now, do you think he can survive? Do you think he should survive?
I don't think he should survive. I think he's done the deal, the trade deal. That's what everybody said he was there for, that he was a very experienced negotiator. He had all the experience of Northern Ireland and then at the EU level of negotiating trade deals. The trade deal is done. He's the ambassador. He shouldn't be the conduit of scandal and division. I think he should take it upon himself to step down now.
And one final question. If Keir Starmer tries to hang on to him, does that damage the Prime Minister?
Yeah, the Prime Minister is already damaged by this. I mean, there is a widespread view, right or wrong, that there are things being concealed along this road. Peter Mandelson is an arch-villain already in this story. I think it's time for him to have a dignified exit. He may be durable, but he's not eternal.
Not forever. All right. Lord Glasman, Maurice Glasman, Natasha Clark, thank you both very much indeed.
Thank you.
I'd like to hear what you think about this story as well. Does Lord Mandelson need to step down now? Text 84850 or email mar@lbc.co.uk. Poland has shot down multiple Russian drones that entered its airspace last night, the first direct fire from a NATO country since the start of this war. I'll be getting the reaction from the former head of the Foreign Office. Time now, 6:20.
LBC. More. Tonight with Andrew Marr. Watch live on both Global Player and the new LBC app.
6:22. Now, this is not World War III, but it is alarming. Poland's had to scramble its air force after multiple Russian drones entered the NATO country. Britain's Defence Secretary John Healey said this afternoon that we are living in a new era of threat and that he was looking to see what help the British military could give to Poland to protect its airspace. Was this some kind of giant blunder by the Russians or a deliberate attempt to provoke NATO with all the dangers that involves? Let's talk now to Lord Simon McDonald, the former head of the Foreign Office. Lord McDonald, very good to have you on the show. This is the nearest Poland has got to proper war since the Second World War. It's quite a moment, isn't it?
It is, but it's a test rather than the beginning of World War III. I do not believe it was an accident. This happened in the context of a wider attack against Western Ukraine. Some drones strayed over into Polish airspace. I think that probably suited Russian purposes, but they were probing rather than attacking.
In terms of the response, because obviously that's what the Russians are interested in, I said it was the Polish Air Force, but actually Dutch aircraft were involved as well. In other words, this was an all-NATO response.
Of course. And the Poles have called for Article 4 consultations. So this involves the whole of the alliance. They haven't yet invoked Article 5. They're not looking for a collective security response, but clearly that's on the table.
At which point we turn to think about Donald Trump and what's going on in the White House. I don't know if you can help me to decode what President Trump has posted on his social truth media outlet. He said, "What's with Russia violating Poland's airspace with drones? Here we go." What do you think that means?
Difficult to interpret, Andrew, frankly. Absolutely not standard diplomatic language. I note that it took him a whole 12 hours to come up with those two sentences. But it's true that all eyes are now on Trump and Washington. This is a test, and how the US responds to the test is most important. This should be the moment when America steps up at last and applies real sanctions to Russia.
And it's not the only probe that we've had, of course, because the British Council building in Kiev was hit by the Russians recently. Ursula von der Leyen's plane had its GPS jammed, probably by the Russians over Bulgaria. In other words, this so-called asymmetric warfare, this probe, push, is going on all over the place. To what extent do you think this is about trying to persuade European members of NATO not to send troops, not to send too much military equipment into Ukraine because of what might follow after that?
Whilst this is an escalation, I think all of the escalation so far has been contained. They're not looking for a hot fight against NATO. The Russians don't want that. But you're right. They are framing the conditions for when a negotiation starts between Kyiv and Moscow. And you're right again. The Russians want as small a European role in Ukraine as they can get away with.
So it's a kind of be very, very careful what you're doing moment. You mentioned earlier on, Simon, the sanctions. Like a lot of people, I'm slightly confused about where we actually are with the American threat of further sanctions. I mean, they could be very serious, but right at the moment, EU countries are buying a huge amount of Russian oil, even now, yes?
The sanctions have never been as complete or as punishing to the Russian economy as we've presented over the last several years. But there are sanctions that would penalize Russia. They are mostly in the energy sector. And these are the ones that should now be dusted down. Right now, the United States President Trump is punishing a country like India for taking Russian oil and gas more than he's punishing Russia for what it's doing in Ukraine.
Which is odd. And there's no real sign, is there, that the Russian economy is doing anything other than adapting itself to become a war economy. There's no real sign of collapse or hyperinflation or mass unemployment or anything like that.
The economy is not strong. A war economy is not a desirable state of affairs. They're creaking. When you're compiling economic statistics, producing tanks looks more impressive than producing cars. But the distortion within the economy over time applies greater strain. So I don't think the war is good for the Russian economy in the medium and long term.
And one final question about the view from Moscow, as it were, because obviously Vladimir Putin is a great games player and he's playing games here. But now the Russians have suggested talks with the Polish Defence Ministry about how to go further forward, which suggests to me that they don't want to provoke this further, push this further.
I would hesitate before claiming that, but I don't think they want to push it over the edge. I don't think they want a shooting war with Poland or NATO.
Another issue, if you don't mind, Lord McDonald, you were, of course, the British ambassador in Israel for a time. And tonight we have President Herzog of Israel meeting the Prime Minister Keir Starmer in Downing Street. Now, both of them have made statements about the other, which are pretty icy, pretty difficult. I'd just be fascinated to know, when you have two leaders who do not agree on something very substantial like that, what happens in these moments? Is it sort of backslapping and cordiality, however big the disagreement, or do these meetings from time to time become genuinely confrontational?
I think icy rather than confrontational. They are clearly allowing some of the atmosphere of the meeting to get out into the public, and both leaders have their reasons for doing that. But it's still important that they are meeting and they are talking. One of the oddest criticisms leveled against diplomats is that they meet. Meeting does not imply that you approve of someone. It means that you have business to discuss.
Mm-hmm. And you'd be surprised, I think, if I didn't ask you a question about Britain's current ambassador in Washington, Lord Mandelson. I'm not going to go into the whys and wherefores or what should happen to him or anything like that, don't worry. But I am interested in whether you think that there's a danger that this overshadows the incredibly important Trump state visit coming very soon.
It's not helpful, Andrew. Not at all helpful.
All right, Lord McDonald, I think that's about as much as I'm going to get out from you on that. Thank you very, very much indeed for joining me and talking to LBC tonight. Now then, Keir Starmer has hosted the Israeli President Isaac Herzog in number 10 today, despite the fiery condemnations from members of parliament. And after those controversial Israeli strikes in Qatar, the two men will have, well, a lot to talk about. More on that next, but the time now, 6:29, and Amelia Cox has your news headlines.
Prince Harry is meeting his father, the King, for the first time in 18 months. The Duke of Sussex arrived at Clarence House earlier this evening and left around 45 minutes later. The lawyer for dozens of Jeffrey Epstein's victims has told LBC Lord Mandelson should resign unless he's willing to speak to authorities. Speaking on Tonight with Andrew Marr, Gloria Allred says he must tell them anything he knows as further reports of their relationship emerge. The Israeli First Lady has defended a strike on Hamas negotiators in Qatar, which has been condemned by the Prime Minister. Speaking exclusively to LBC, Michal Herzog says nothing has happened with talks in 2 years, apart from when Donald Trump intervened. LBC weather, rain clearing to the northeast tonight, showers lingering in northern and western areas, a low of 5 degrees.
Nick Ferrari at breakfast on LBC.
It was a day the world would never forget.
This just in, you were looking at obviously a very disturbing live shot there. That is the World Trade Center.
I just saw another plane coming in from the side. This looks like it is some sort of a concerted effort to attack the World Trade Center.
The Al-Qaeda attack on September the 11th struck at the heart of America. But what if this man had been president at the time?
We have an opportunity to do something that could be phenomenal. And I don't want to be cute. I don't want to be a wise guy, but the Riviera of the Middle East.
We'll speak with a leading US historian and a psychologist and ask how would the US, the UK and the world have fared if President Trump had been in the White House. That's tomorrow with me, Nick Ferrari, on LBC.
Nick Ferrari at breakfast. Back tomorrow morning from 7. Listen on your radio, on Global Player and the LBC app. Tony. Leading Britain's conversation, LBC, tonight with Andrew Marr.
It's 6:33. Now, if their public statements are a true reflection, then the meeting between Keir Starmer and Israel's President Isaac Herzog should be tense and difficult. The Prime Minister is under pressure from those who think he shouldn't meet Herzog at all. Here is the SNP's Westminster leader, Stephen Flynn, in the Commons earlier on.
The Prime Minister will today welcome into his home, a home entrusted to him by the people of these Isles, the man who called for the collective punishment of the Palestinian people and who signed the artillery shells that destroyed their homes, their families and their friends. A man who will ignore every word the Prime Minister says. Would he invite Vladimir Putin into number 10? Would he invite Benjamin Netanyahu into number 10? What does it say of this Prime Minister that he will harbour this man whilst children starve?
Meanwhile, from the Israeli side, President Herzog's office says the meeting will take place against the backdrop of an ugly wave of anti-Semitism in Britain, and it's happening so that he can reject outright the positions presented by the UK recently. So, is there any real point to this meeting? Let's talk now to Ayalon, the former head of the Israeli intelligence service, Shin and a former commander-in-chief of Israel's Navy. Thank you very much indeed for coming in, Mr. Ayalon. Can I start off with that sort of basic question? Is there any real influence that the UK has over the Netanyahu government in Israel?
Well, up to now, no. But what I'm saying is that, yes, England can influence on the way we believe we have to go by declaring support in a reality of two states, which is to recognize Palestine as a state and to tell us there is no place to Hamas, but you are fighting against the Palestinian people, and it is a time to negotiate on the reality of two states. And negotiations should take in account the reality in which we are a state recognized by the Palestinians, and they should be a state recognized by Israel and by the international community.
Do you think there's any chance that Prime Minister Netanyahu would accept that?
No, I don't think so. But, I think that if the Prime Minister will say it, and England will say it, and will join the international community, will join the Saudi-French initiative, this is a message of the international community. And the international community, by sending this message, is telling something very, very important to the two spoilers of this reality. Our right extreme wing and Hamas on the other. This is a nightmare reality of two states. This is a total defeat to the ideology of Hamas, and it is a total defeat to the ideology of our extreme right. We have to understand the reality in the Middle East. Finally, there is no other option to stabilize and to create a better reality than two states. So this is a message.
Now, that's really, really interesting. Now, you were in charge of Shin Bet, a very, very admired and feared organization. With all your experience, what is your view of the action in Qatar to attack the Hamas leaders? They were called terrorist chieftains by Netanyahu, but they were also the Hamas negotiators.
Well, I don't have any intelligence information. I cannot justify it. And frankly speaking, I'm not sure I understand the reason why to do it. By the way I understood the leadership of Hamas, the leaders outside were much more moderate than the leaders inside. So what is the message? The way I understand the message is we are sending a message that we know only one language, which is a military language. We do not speak diplomacy. And what I'm saying is that a player who cannot speak in two languages in the Middle East will not survive. There is a limit. For 40 years, I was a member of the security organization or community in Israel. And if I learned something after 40 years, is that there is a limit to what we can achieve by the use of military power. And it's time for us. We achieved all what can be achieved by the use of military power. All our commanders are saying it. Our chief of staff is saying it. And it's time for us for statesmanship.
And do you think that if the United Nations goes for the two-state solution, it looks very, very likely that resolution will pass at the UN, that will have a big effect on not just the government, but Israeli society?
Right. It is a message. If I understand the reality today, America will veto. So, it will be a message to the two extreme wings, ours and theirs. And the message will be very clear. You will kill as much as you want, but you will not shape the future of the region, the future of Israel, and the future of Palestine. And the future will be decided by the majority and by the international community. And it is very, very important because, in the next 12 months, we shall have elections, no matter what Netanyahu wants. And it should be on the table because in Israel and in Palestine, it is not discussed It is not on the table. So this message should be sent by the international community.
Now, we're talking about a two-state solution, and we're talking about the reshaping of the region. What is your view at the moment of what's going on in the West Bank? Because it seems to me that settlers are pushing and pushing and pushing at the moment.
Look, the settlers and the radical right wing of the Israeli political community is leading the region. They are parallel to Hamas among the Palestinians, but they are a small minority. Most Israelis, for Israelis, a reality of one state is a nightmare, because we understand that if we shall not create a reality of two states, we shall lose our identity as a Jewish democracy, and we shall lose our security. Look, in the Middle East, from the Jordan to the sea, there are more than 14 million people. We are 7 million. They are 7 million and something. We are not majority. And when they explain us that we have to annex, all the territories,
more land,
it is clear that we shall not be a Jewish democracy. It will not be a Jewish identity, and it will not be a democracy. And we shall lose our security. Hamas today is not the most radical branch of terror. Because, 7 days after the 7th of October, we saw in the website of the Global Jihad, which is, a combination of Al-Qaeda and ISIS. And they are saying, look, something is happening in Palestine, and chaos will be created. And this is a time to attack Jewish targets, American targets, and Israeli targets. So we see branches of Al-Qaeda and ISIS in the West Bank and in Gaza.
There could not be a more important warning tonight. Mr. Ayalon, thank you very much indeed for coming to LBC and talking to me. Now then, in amongst all the scandal about Lord Mandelson's ties with Jeffrey Epstein, the race to be deputy leader of the Labour Party rumbles on, with one of the hopefuls withdrawing just this afternoon. Our political correspondent, Aggie Chambre, has been keeping across it, as you would expect. Aggie, give us the latest.
So, Andrew, today 6 became 5. Alison McGovern, the housing minister, pulled out of the race, basically saying that she was not going to progress to the next round, and she's thrown her weight behind Bridget Phillipson. So now it is increasingly looking like just 2 of those MPs will get over the line tomorrow to get that magic number of 80 MPs. I've spoken to Bridget Phillipson's team tonight. They think she will get over the line today. In the next few minutes, we'll find out exactly how many nominations all of them have. But they said to me she's very comfortably over, and they said they're confident of winning the entire race. Lucy Powell's team too think they are confident tomorrow, potentially not today, but they said we are going to be so close today. They think they're going to get the numbers too. So what that means is we are going to see a race probably between Lucy Powell, sacked on Friday as Leader of the House, and Bridget Phillipson, Number 10's pick for this as Education Secretary.
And just in human terms, let's remind ourselves how extraordinary this is, because Bridget Phillipson, only a few weeks ago was being briefed against as a likely victim of the reshuffle. Liz Lloyd, who was in Number 10, didn't like her and all the rest of it. And now, because of the circumstance of politics and the chance of life, she has become Keir Starmer's main sort of defender.
Indeed, and she's the person that people are saying to me, if she wins this entire race, there'll be a big sigh of relief. And Lucy Powell, Leader of the House just on Friday, is seen as a potential troublemaker. She's seen as the anti-Keir Starmer pick, which may be unfair because everything she said, at least in public so far, has not been critical of the Prime Minister.
Well, we are very, very keen indeed, Lucy Powell, if you're listening, for you to come onto the show and explain exactly what your views are about all these things. But it is, I think, fair to say that she's pretty close to and is a supporter of Andy Burnham, the Mayor of Greater Manchester, and it's pretty much an open secret that he would like to return to the House of Commons through a by-election and then challenge for the leadership himself.
Indeed, and that's something people are talking about today, suggesting this could be a sort of shadow boxing match for the leadership, suggesting that she would actually then pave the way for Andy Burnham to come back in. And someone suggesting me today as well that if she wins, she could be throwing curveballs and getting the encouragement of Andy Burnham to do so.
Very interesting. So let's be absolutely clear. By the end of this week, we'll know, first of all, if there is a contest, because if nobody apart from Bridget Phillipson gets 80 votes, that's it, yeah?
That's it.
And if there is a contest, we'll know who it's between.
Exactly. So,
and what's the timing after that?
Right. So in the next few minutes, actually, Andrew, at 7 p.m, we're going to find out how many nominations everybody has today. And so I think Bridget Phillipson thinks she'll get over the line today. Lucy Powell potentially will, but probably unlikely. Then tomorrow at 5 p.m. again, the nominations close. And then probably Lucy Powell at that stage gets over the line. Then that continues and the race continues over the conference season until Saturday, the 25th of October, at which point the winner is crowned. But it's interesting speaking to people because some people are suggesting, even though Bridget Phillipson at the moment tops the polls of Labour members, people suggesting Lucy Powell could genuinely win this.
Absolutely fascinating. And there's a danger of making these things sound a little bit dry and procedural, but this is really about the future of the government.
It's really about the future of the government, and this could really destabilise the entire Starmer project. Not to be dramatic about it, but these are the conversations that are going on in the tea rooms, in PCH, in Portcullis House 2, people feeling very, very worried about the Starmer project and basically suggesting that if Lucy Powell and indeed even Bridget Phillipson, even more subtly, are critical of the Starmer project over the next 6 weeks, that could have a really destabilising effect.
It is going to be a turbulent time ahead. Keep tuned in to LBC and to Aggie Chambre, please. Now then, here is a shocker and, yes, an LBC exclusive. Young children in this country are being arrested at the rate of nearly one a week for terrorism offences and plotting attacks on British soil. Counter-terrorism police have arrested 43 children in the past year, some of them as young as 11, for offences including preparing bomb and mass gun attacks. I'm joined now by LBC's crime correspondent, Andy Hughes. Andy, this is one of those stories so astonishing, I find it hard to believe. Really, children as young as 11 involved in possible terror attacks?
That's exactly it. And some of the offences we're talking about are mass bomb attacks, mass gun attacks, terror attacks at music festivals. And the child who was arrested for 11, he, in fact, was arrested for preparation of terrorism. This is something we've never seen before. And this number of 43, this is the highest that it's ever been. This now accounts for 1/5 of all terror arrests, and that's children. This is primarily being driven by extreme far right. But I spoke with an undercover officer in counter-terrorism policing. He can't be identified, of course, because of the work he does, but he told me that these kids are all being radicalised on easily accessible social media sites.
The content is absolutely vile.
Are we talking bomb manuals? Are we talking planning terror attacks? What we're talking?
If you name it and you'll see it. There are sadistically horrible people out there. Very few of the actual individuals that were in the centre, the nexus that were driving the threat, were actually carrying out any offences themselves. What they actually prefer is to encourage other people, give other people the resources, poke other individuals, exacerbate their grievances and encourage those to go out and carry out an attack.
So how does it work? Well, hate preachers are grooming young people on social media, and they're supplying them with what police call terror handbooks. This involves bomb manuals, how to make explosives, homemade explosives, and also how to make 3D printed guns. And in fact, police have found many explosives and many guns at the homes of these children without the parents knowing. So I asked the officer why children are increasingly being targeted as proxies for terror attacks.
We've got a huge issue where primarily young boys feel like they're under attack. There is that male toxicity thing that's sort of pumped through the media. And so a lot of these youngsters will seek to try and find answers to some of those. And there's not many people talking about that in the mainstream. So that's where our extremists will exploit those.
Andy, my brain is struggling to compute this because we're talking about children and we're talking about lethal terror attacks. Straight question, do you think these children, however they're radicalised, whatever they're looking at online, are genuinely dangerous?
Yes, absolutely. I mean, there's been several that have gone to prison. A 16-year-old was sent to prison not that long ago for plotting a mass terror attack at the Isle of Wight festival. Another 15-year-old boy, he was found with a huge cache of weapons, including knives, guns, explosives. He was ready to commit a terror attack. They just caught him in time. So how on earth they're keeping on top of this is another question.
Well, we're both in the news business, and part of our job is to bring people little disturbing stories from time to time. They don't come much more disturbing than this one. Andy, thank you very much indeed for that. And Andy's got a special episode of his global podcast with Neil Basu, The Crime Agents, out now, if you want to hear more about this extraordinary investigation. Coming up, a new mortgage is being launched to take on the injustice of the bank of mum and dad, and we're going to hear more of that in just a few minutes' time. But the time now, 6:49.
Coming up at 7 on LBC, Ian Dale.
I think the world of you, and I feel hopeless and furious about what has happened. Not my words, the words of Peter Mandelson to Jeffrey Epstein. He's toast, isn't he?
Ian Dale on LBC. View. Tonight with Andrew Marr. Listen on your smart speaker. Just say, play LBC.
6:51, and at the top of the show, I asked for your views about Peter Mandelson and whether he should resign over his past links, 20-year-old links, with the sex criminal Jeffrey Epstein. I would have been disappointed had there been a bland response from LBC listeners, and there hasn't been one. Catherine in Muswell Hill says, of course Mandelson has to step down. Remaining in post brings the office of British Ambassador into disrepute, and he represents us all. Regardless of his appalling lack of personal judgment, remaining in post is completely incompatible with his, and thus our, political and diplomatic integrity. Bye, Mandy. And one LBC listener texts, Mandelson should not resign. He should be sacked. Why give him the dignity of resignation? Sack him. He should be given a cardboard box and walked out by security. Tell us what you really think. Now then, the bank of mum and dad represents an injustice of a kind, the gap between young people who can rely on cash or capital from their parents to get a start, including perhaps for a house, and all those who can't. Well, Newcastle Building Society is taking a stand. It's got a major new mortgage out for first-time buyers, loans of up to £350,000 for people with a deposit as low as £5,000. A good-sounding deal, but it's only available for people whose deposit comes from their own savings, not from a gift or loan from someone else. Well, this is very interesting as an initiative. I want to talk now to Lord David Willets, President of the Resolution Foundation and author of The Pinch, How Baby Boomers Stole Their Children's Future. David, I deduce from that you're not terribly keen on the bank of mum and dad.
No, actually, Andrew, I think it's a completely human reaction for parents to want to help their own kids. And of course, they should do so. But there are lots of kids who sadly don't have parents who can help out in that way. And we've got to help them as well, because otherwise owning a house will become hereditary. You own a house because your parents own a house and can help out as the bank of mum and dad. And we don't want to live in that kind of society. So I think this is a really interesting, unusual and attractive, apparently, offer.
Very interesting. So presumably this Newcastle Building Society initiative is something you'd quite like, because it seems one way of dealing with a solution, allow people a mortgage on a very, very low deposit, which they might be able to get for themselves, but exclude people who come along with money from mum and dad.
Yeah, I mean, 2 points there. I think, first of all, I suspect that there are overall financial rules about the balance of lending and deposits that a building society can have. So I suspect it's going to be difficult for Newcastle to make many of these sorts of offers. So they're trying to ration it to a group they particularly want to help. And I think the other thing that many young people say to me is what they find frustrating is they're paying high rents. And for many of them, the cost of maintaining the mortgage, the monthly payments on the mortgage, is no higher than their rents, might even be lower than the rents. That's why helping them with deposits is crucial, because after they've got through into the system, having raised the deposit, then they can afford the mortgage because it's no higher than the rent.
What would you feel about the state helping people who couldn't get deposits but had a decent income to get onto the housing ladder?
Well, what we proposed at Resolution Foundation a few years back was we actually thought there should be a capital grant to everyone. I don't think you have to have a complicated means test. We then proposed in our report £10,000 for young people to help them on something like this. And to be honest, compared with total public spending and the amount of public spending that goes on pensioners, that is only about £7 billion when we spend £150 billion on pensioner benefits. So I think something like that to help them, because, if I may say so, in our generation, Andrew, there were initiatives, everything from council house sales to all those schemes with low price private shares that helped get us started on ownership of houses and shares. We need some more initiatives like that.
David, let's talk a little bit about the wider politics of this, because we now have an entire generation, possibly more than a generation, who, because of the cost of housing in this country and their lack of help from the bank of mum and dad, simply are never going to be able to afford a house of their own. Do you think this is driving a kind of turbulent extremism in politics, particularly among young voters? In other words, the old consensus is breaking down all around us. And is this part of the reason why?
I think you're absolutely right, Andrew. I think it is part of the reason why. And in our generation, home ownership is over 70%. For the younger generation, on optimistic forecasts, eventually it might get to 50%. So my view is that it's in everyone's interest that young people have a stake in society. And post the crash, what we did, we have ended up over-restricting mortgages. It's made it too hard for them to get started. That's why this scheme is great. And we should also be looking at other ways of helping with the cost of home ownership.
Couldn't agree more. A very, very important political issue we don't talk enough about. Lord Willets, David Willets, thank you very much indeed for that. Returning now to our top story, so much information has been pouring in today about the relationship between Lord Peter Mandelson and Jeffrey Epstein. So let's go back to our political editor, Natasha Clark, to get the very latest. Natasha, has there yet been a response from Number 10?
No, Andrew. So they're not commenting formally on tonight's revelations that we talked about at the top of the show. They're basically just pointing back to what the Prime Minister and the Ambassador have said today in those interviews that obviously we saw this morning, and of course Prime Minister's questions. So very much the line is just about holding tonight. Let's see whether any more newspapers have any more revelations tomorrow. Secondly, I just wanted to mention a few of the Labour MPs who we didn't talk about. We have been speaking to people, me and Aggie have been speaking to people all day, and lots of them privately behind the scenes are saying they do feel that Lord Mandelson's position is untenable and that he should go. So far, just 2 MPs have put their head above the parapet to say that in public. That's Bill Ribeiro-Addy, she's obviously running for the leadership, and Kim Johnson.
They're both very much on the left of the party.
Left of the party.
So what we're still waiting to see is whether a sort of more mainstream, more and more senior Labour figure comes out and says, it's game over.
Exactly, and I potentially think that could happen tomorrow. Just one final update as well. The Liberal Democrats have called for the Civil Service Commission to look into this. I've contacted them. They wonder if Lord Mandelson has broken what they call the Diplomatic Service Code, which I haven't heard of, but we are investigating, because obviously he's not a normal appointment in this way, that actually he can't be removed in the same way that obviously Angela Rayner was removed last week, according to the Independent Ethics Advisor.
That's a very interesting question. Could Keir Starmer simply pick up the phone and sack him?
He can, yeah. It's within Keir Starmer's, power to do so. But in terms of having an independent oversight, obviously he could, I guess, ask, the Independent Ethics Advisor to look into this. But there's no formal process because he is an appointment of the Prime Minister. It doesn't quite work in the same way. So we're all keeping an eye on this.
Absolutely fascinating. Well, I'm going to be back with you tomorrow. If you've missed any of today's show, you can listen back on Catch Up on both Global Player and the LBC app, where you can read and watch the latest from LBC. You can put your news categories in the order you want them. You can pause and rewind live radio, and you can listen to a range of podcasts. So, download the official LBC app for free from your app store now. Coming up at 10 o'clock on LBC, it is Ben Kentish. But right now, with his toaster beside him, it's Ian Dale.
Thank you very much, Andrew. Now, when I woke up this morning, I was half convinced we were nearer to a third world war than we have been at any time since the Cuban Missile Crisis. We'll be discussing the consequences of Russia invading Poland's airspace after 9. But first,
I regret very, very deeply indeed carrying on that association with him for far longer than I should have done.
I'll bet he does. Well, tonight our ambassador to the US, Peter Mandelson, stands on the precipice of yet another embarrassing resignation after leaked emails incriminate him even further in the scandal over his relationship with Jeffrey Epstein. It's highly probable he'll be gone by the end of our